People usually optimize their conversion rates, their retention, all kinds of other metrics. But today I want to focus on the average order value. It's also pretty powerful because if you can increase that, so have more dollars per order, this will improve your profitability. This will improve generally your entire financial performance of the store. And I want to show you how we improved it for our own stores. So maybe you can apply some of those points to your store. So at the end of this video, this number right here should be bright green and hopefully much higher than 8%. So jumping straight in, what is actually the AOV made out of? It's obviously the product price with the local tax usually included in that, right? Again, it depends how you want to show it, but the point is that's obviously the baseline AOV. However, that's not where it stops, right? When the customer hits the checkout page, you also usually, most stores charge them some sort of shipping revenue. Sure, you might have a free shipping option, but most stores also have a express or priority shipping or different types of shipping fees depending on the country or whatever it might be. And that is a part of the AOV, right? Because that shipping revenue is part of the revenue for that order. So also important to include. Then you can, of course, up and cross-sell while that person is checking out, right? You can start already up and cross-selling on the add to cart page, actually, but also on the checkout page. And of course, I actually think most powerfully on the thank you page, which I would consider still being a part of the same order. So once the customer's on the thank you page, you can still upsell them something there. And that will also increase the average order value. Finally, you should always have tip enabled. We're going to get into that in a second. Customers do on average, there's a lot of statistics on that. They do tip also on Shopify, and having that option in your checkout and putting the right settings is quite powerful to also increase your average order value. That's of course included as well. However, not to forget, so below the dash line, what we would deduct from the AOV is the average discount. So obviously if your customer uses a discount code on your checkout page, it will deduct the AOV as well as the transaction fees. Of course, if you're using Shopify payments or PayPal or Stripe or any other payment processor, they will deduct transaction fees, which is usually a percentage on some fixed amount, which will decrease your AOV. So why is this important? I think it's important to understand the components so that we then know what to optimize and where we can squeeze the most juice. So the AOV, the most basic AOV, as I said, is just the product price with the local tax or VAT. That's the baseline AOV if you don't do anything else. However, the AOV that's pretty much shown on your Shopify dashboard where we started is the AOV that takes into account discounts. So they even write it, right? Shipping revenue, if you, of course, up and cross-sell something on your checkout page, and also the tip. So it includes all of that, right? That is the actual AOV that Shopify shows you and the analytics page shows you that you can then optimize. And most people don't actually think about how, how really all those different components come together. And finally, the AOV that actually hits your bank account, probably maybe the most important, is of course that AOV minus any transaction fees. Like in our store, actually, a lot of the payouts get converted into a different currency. So that also includes FX fees, which are actually quite high, sometimes even higher than the transaction fees. And of course, on PayPal, they can be much higher than on Shopify payments. And you might be using some other local payment processor like Klarna or whatever it might be, where it might be lower or higher. So that's the actual AOV per order that hits your bank account. That's what we want to optimize in this video. So let's jump straight in. Now that we know how the sausage is made, we know what parts we can optimize. Okay, probably not what you expected, but let's start with a very simple but effective way to increase your AOV without any other trade-offs, pretty much. And that is adding tipping options to your checkout pages. So I'm in the checkout settings of a Shopify store. And if you scroll down, and I specifically unselected it, here you obviously have the tipping option. It's a little bit hidden. And you'd be surprised how many stores forget about this or don't even know about this or just literally forgot to press it once and then don't really think about it again until maybe months or years later, at which point they left so much money on the table. So if you tick this, then on every single checkout page that a customer of your store ever reaches from that moment onwards, they will be presented those tipping options. Now, what's also interesting, and this took me actually months to realize myself, is that by default, there's this other, even more hidden setting here, which is high tipping options until customers choose to add a tip. And I would actually unselect this option, and I'll show you why. So if you go to a standard checkout page, right, where this option is selected to hide, right, what you will see is that you need to essentially, as a customer, press this tick box, right, to actually see what the tipping options are, right? And only now you can actually press and tip. It's quite easy, and we have statistics for that, right? And essentially, we even could compare the tips between different stores. Again, there's a lot of other variables involved here, obviously, but we can see, and I think it's an intuitive point, right, that if you put in your card information here, it's very easy to just gloss over this and just press pay now. However, if you untick the setting, right, what happens is that after you pay, you don't have any tick box. You immediately just have the add to tip section, and that makes it much easier for your customers to decide if they want to tip you. Again, this is all optional, right? So in that sense, it shouldn't, everyone who doesn't want to tip isn't going to tip, and only the customers who really like your store, your product, or whatever will have the option to do so. So this is quite powerful, and I think the point here is really that, sure, most customers will not tip you, but we see it from our own stores, and I think I'm sure there's a lot of statistics out there, and Shopify has it themselves, that in our experience, something like 5 to 10% of our customers tip. Now, that adds up over time, right? Especially if your average tip is, let's say, 10 or 15%, right? And 10% of your customers, let's say, give you a tip, right? That increases your AOV over time substantially, and that's pure profit, right? I mean, that's pure margin. There's no trade-off with your conversion rate or with anything else, right? Because it's completely optional, and you're on the checkout page and you have the option to tip or not. And that way is a very easy way for you to, again, increase your profitability, but also gather very valuable information from the customers who love your store and products most, right? Because they're actually willing to tip you. And you can then actually filter out those customers, create different email campaigns for them, and that can be extremely powerful just in terms of that. Now, one other point, and there's a lot of statistics on that as well, is obviously how do you set those presets, right? So that's the last setting here to really kind of go super granular, maybe too granular, but I think by default it's actually 5, 10, and 15%, if I remember correctly. That's kind of what Shopify gives you initially. And I like increasing it a bit. I think the point is that the highest preset should be a bit higher for the people who do want to tip you 20%. Again, then they can manually type in whatever number they want to, but it's much easier to obviously press one of the options. And finally, what I will say, here you have this text, which you can also change in the backend. And think, again, here, this is the base text, the standard text that Shopify just gives you. But I think for some stores, right, you might have a reason why that you would put here why you actually deserve a higher tip. For example, you might be donating 10% of that to a cause that's associated with your brand or your product, right? You might be reinvesting all of that money into research and development to create a new type of product that is an improvement on the current version, whatever it might be. Putting it here, right, in a very concise way might actually also boost your tips, and that is one of the, I think, very easy and simple methods to increase your AOV. All right, we just discussed how you can increase your AOV by optimizing your tipping settings in the checkout section of your Shopify store. Now let's also talk about how you can increase the AOV by up and cross-selling. And that's, of course, step number one is to do it through flows, specifically through email, SMS, and push notification flows. And then I'll show you a completely different way that you can also up and cross-sell. But let's start with flows. So the point here is, of course, that thinking from first principles, we want to leverage as much information as possible that our customers give us, right? And they, of course, give us their email and their phone, which, by the way, you should always, in the checkout settings, have both options selected so that customers can also provide either or. And also not to forget, and most people don't even realize this, but every time someone goes to your website, they have cookie settings or browser settings that can be saved and used with also push notifications, apps like Push Owl that we're going to get into in a second. But those are the three main ways that you can leverage information to create flows and increase your AOV, but not only your AOV. So let's jump quickly into one of our Klaviyo accounts, right? So here you can see we have 6 or 7 main flows that are completely automated. And again, many of them are really focused to either improve conversion rates or retention. There's only really one flow that's super focused on improving the AOV, and that's the up and cross-sell flow. The way it works is that after a customer makes a purchase, you can send them immediately another email or SMS asking if they want to essentially purchase something on top of that product, because it fits, it's a very good complementary good, and offer them some sort of discount, right? And that would be a post-purchase flow. And again, you can play with different time delays and all kinds of different settings. But generally, those can be pretty powerful, depending obviously on your business and what types of products you have and the product matching that you can offer. Klaviyo allows you to do both email and SMS. However, there's also other apps such as SMS Bump, and they do a pretty good job specifically for SMS. I actually prefer them more than Klaviyo, really, when it comes to SMS only. Generally, SMS still have a much higher open rate and conversion rate than emails. To keep that in mind, of course, way less people leave their phone number than email on the checkout settings. Again, make sure that you kind of help make it as easy as possible for customers to actually leave their phone number, and try everyone who does leave a phone number and gives you permission to send them an SMS, definitely go down that route, because you'll still see higher conversion rates there, much higher than with email. Definitely do both, basically. So I think the kind of the waterfall should be, if they only leave their email, then obviously send them an email flow. If they only leave a phone, send them SMS flow. And if they leave both email and phone, I would actually choose phone. The last thing I want to touch on is push notifications. So I mentioned, unless your customers are using like a VPN or something, there are browser settings that allow you to also send them push notifications. Again, the app that we used is called Push Owl. Yeah, they have great reviews. I mean, it works. Those are the three main ways how you can send out flows, right? Through email, SMS, and push. And that way you are leveraging most of the information that your customers give you. Okay, so we just discussed how you can increase your AOV through a range of different flows, specifically email, SMS, and push notifications. And we went through some of the most effective flows to do that. However, there's a completely different way to up and cross-sell, and that's directly on your product pages and checkout and thank you pages. And of course, there's a bunch of different apps that allow you to do that. So that's the second way you can leverage up and cross-selling to increase your AOV, right? So if you just type in up, immediately upsell, if you just type in up and cross-sells, right, you'll see all those different apps that essentially allow you to upsell and cross-sell. I'll go to one of the most classic apps, which again, there's so many different options now in this niche. The idea always remains the same, right? So here I'm on One Click Upsell, which is one of the kind of older apps, one of the OG apps. And I pressed on create new funnel just for you to have the overview. And it's very simple. You essentially have two options, right? You can add an upsell offer post-purchase, right? So once a customer hits the thank you page, that's when you hopefully have a great complementary good that you can offer to them as a post-purchase upsell, and then again, maybe even a discount or some sort of incentive on top. Or there are options to do pre-purchase upsells and cross-sells, and that might already be on the checkout page or even on the add to cart page. How's that work? So let me actually show you an example. So with this store, if you press add to cart for this projector, just a random example, and you press checkout, what happens is there's a pop-up for an adjustable stand, which is in this case the cross-sell offer with a timer and so on and so forth. And if you press add to order, it will automatically add this and you will go to the checkout page. Now, I know from before, and there might still be apps that allow you to also upsell and cross-sell on the checkout page directly. However, this is always changing because Shopify, for good reasons, they're very, very careful which apps have the authentication to actually change the checkout page, because there's obviously all kinds of privacy and credit card information on this page that needs to be kind of safeguarded. So they're very careful with what apps can modify your checkout page. I remember, and even this app allowed you to also even have a upsell offer on the checkout page. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not. So you need to play around with different apps. And again, this really depends on also if you have Shopify Plus or not, because on Shopify Plus, you can modify your checkout settings much more. On the more basic plans, you're much more limited in terms of how exactly you can modify your checkout page. However, what you can do in any case is, so once the person presses pay now, right, and they land on the thank you page there, you can definitely always have a post-purchase offer right there on the thank you page. And I actually think that's the most effective, and also you essentially de-risking yourself, right? Because the person already made the purchase. They already, again, trusts your brand and likes the product enough to obviously make the purchase. And then they're already on the thank you page. And obviously the inertia is there to continue that purchase. And actually, I think that's the perfect place to, if you have a good matching product, right here, projector and the stand to the projector makes sense. And again, there's a lot of those complementary goods. So to summarize, you can increase it through the flows by sending emails, SMS, and push notifications with the contact information that your customers provide. But then you can also cross and upsell on the product pages directly. Okay, another way to increase your AOV is to A/B test your price. And the challenge here is really running clean and statistically significant tests. And I'll show you exactly how we did this for this store and how you can also apply this to one of your stores. So this website, right, it's actually an older store of ours. At its peak, which was already a while back, to be fair, it was making something like 200K a month. And actually around that time, we were running those tests to see how we can improve the AOV without actually reducing our conversion rate. And the way we did this is by essentially, and there's a bunch of different apps that allow you to do that, right, is to run a clean test where we would test two different prices. So we use an app called Dexter, and again, you can go to the Shopify App Store and just type in A/B test price, and I'm sure there's a few other apps that allow you to do that. What this app allows you to do is essentially take your product page that I just showed you and all the traffic that's coming to your product page, regardless if it's from Facebook or Google, wherever you're sending the traffic from, it splits it into 50-50, right? And the only thing it changes is the price, right? So every single other variable on the product page remains to be the same. And that way you can try to isolate this variable as much as possible. And here you can see we ran the test of the original price back then, which was $69.95, with the new price of $79.95. And to both product pages, we sent around 5,000 visitors, as you can see here in the bottom. Now, here, the original price actually still performed better, right? The revenue per 100 visitors was still significantly higher. And that means that the new price did not win that A/B test, and we kept the original price. Now, revenue per 100 visitors, by the way, isn't the perfect metric, but anyway, you get the point. There's actually a lot more analytics that you can then see, and that way you can analyze who the actual winner was. And here, clearly, we saw that increasing the price by $10 made a big enough difference, right? Where enough people dropped off and less people actually made the purchase, so that new price would not be effective enough. But then, interestingly, right, we ran another test comparing $69.95 with $74.95, and the $74.95 actually performed much better, right? People still, that, changing it from, just increasing it by $5 basically didn't make such a big difference to the customers, and they were willing to pay those $5, and we didn't actually see a decrease in their conversion rate. But then we actually increased their AOV by $5. So you can see that the price is now $74.95, and that's because we actually kept that price since that test. And for every single purchase that's now made, we're getting $5 more per order. And that's a very powerful way to A, increase your AOV, B, increase your profitability, because literally now we're just getting $5 more per order. And then keep on testing, in our case, by $5 increments up and down that curve, that price elasticity curve, right? Where you can find the sweet spot for every single product on your page, where people are still willing to pay. Like, essentially, you're profit maximizing on what is the maximum amount your customers are willing to pay for that product. And knowing those numbers and A/B testing that continuously is an extremely powerful tool to increase your AOV and profitability. Another way to increase your AOV is to optimize your shipping fees. Regardless of what shipping fees you currently offer on your store, chances are there's still a lot of space for improvement for you to actually optimize your AOV and even your conversion rate. So remember, we're kind of going down the checklist here. We talked about how to optimize your tip. We talked about how to up and cross sell more effectively across your product page, but also using email, SMS, and push notifications. And now I want to really talk about optimizing shipping revenue per order, because every single dollar that you add to checkout in terms of shipping fee is literally a dollar that increases your AOV and potentially also your profitability. So it can be pretty powerful to optimize this as well in the long run. So going back to being in the shipping and delivery settings of a Shopify store, which is of course where you can set all of those settings exactly as you want to. And I'm sure most of you already know you can add as many rates as you want to. And you can also add conditional pricing based on weight or price. So that's going to depend on your business model. But how can you improve those fees regardless of your business model as a Shopify store? And I think there's two main points I want to touch on. Number one is what in economics is called price discrimination, which is having many different rates so that you can essentially target many different segments of your audience to self-select into the rate that they prefer most. For example, here we have a very classic scenario where we have a free option, we have an expedited option, a priority express option, right? The difference between the three isn't that big in reality, right? So the priority and express shipping, it ships 1 to 2 days faster, and you get the tracking a bit faster, right? But ultimately, something like 7 to 10% of our customers still choose this option consistently because they're price insensitive and they're willing to pay the extra $12.99 to receive the item 1 or 2 days faster, right? And for them, that extra $12, $13 doesn't really make a big difference. But for us, adding $12.99 to our AOV for those orders does add up over time, right? And it actually also increases our margin, right? Which might be the same for you, where if obviously your shipping fee is more than your shipping cost, right, for that option, then not only do you increase your AOV, you actually literally increase your profit per order. And that can be pretty powerful. And at the same time, we're not actually limiting our conversion rate because we still have the free option, right? So, and indeed, like something like 75 to 80% of our customers still choose the free option, but that is always there and no one drops off because we don't force anyone to pay for shipping, right? You can still always select the free option if you wish to. Having multiple rates can be powerful, and then A/B testing and doing a bit of trial and error, seeing how high you can push this highest rate, can be very powerful to increase your AOV. So that's point number one. Point number two is really playing around with this threshold. So here you can see it's free, but there's a conditional threshold. I quickly touched on that before. So it's only free above $60. Now, I think playing with this A/B testing, this threshold for your store can also be pretty powerful. The best tool for that is actually if you go under orders and you press under abandoned checkouts, you can see all of the abandoned checkouts that you have on your Shopify store. And actually, I actually know many people who kind of never almost go to this tab, right? But this can be a pretty powerful tab. So you can see just yesterday, we've had dozens of abandoned checkouts. And it tells you exactly the dollar amount that was abandoned in the checkout, right? People literally went to the checkout page with this in cart and then dropped off for whatever reason. Why is this powerful in this case? Is because we can calibrate our threshold based on this information, right? In our case, right, all of those abandoned checkouts are above our threshold, right? So that means that our threshold isn't high enough of $60. If our threshold, however, would have been $300 or $400, right, then this might be a problem because it might actually explain, it might be a good indication that why are so many people dropping off, because we're only offering free shipping after $400, right, which might actually be too high, right, and we're losing a lot of customers who are dropping off last minute because they don't want to pay the extra $5 for shipping, right, or whatever it might be. Those two things combined, right, optimizing your threshold, A/B testing all your different rates, adding additional rates if you can, right, will help you increase your AOV and actually, as a side bonus, potentially also your conversion rate. Another powerful tool to increase your AOV and conversion rate is to actually use dynamic pricing. I think it's a very powerful tool that way more Shopify stores can make use of. So let me show you an example. Here we have a store selling all kinds of coffee beans. And why I chose this example is because we have quite a few different SKUs. And the challenge if you have a lot of different SKUs, right, is to manage inventory effectively for all of them. And in our case, it might happen that for a specific blend, we might be running out of stock, right? Because for whatever reason, it was selling out much faster than the other blends in a given time period. Now, this dynamic pricing tool can be very effective for managing inventory and actually making sure, those issues don't happen in the first place. But I'll first explain how it works for that, and then how you can actually apply this even if you don't have inventory, even if you're drop shipping, even if you're not running out of stock. This can be a powerful tool regardless of what your logistics business model is. And I think that's really what I want to focus on here. But I think it's a win-win in the sense that you can apply it for both. So, but where this kind of came from, just to give you an idea, is that you have an item running out of stock. Let's say it's a popular item. The dynamic pricing, as the name says, you can dynamically change the price based on certain triggers, right? Based on certain preset rules, which have originated through how much inventory you have left. So let me show you an example. So we use this app, and again, you can go to the Shopify App Store, which I always have open here, and just type in dynamic pricing. There's a bunch of different apps that allow you to do that, right? So just to give you an example of how this works. And honestly, it's pretty self-explanatory. I think once people know that it exists and understand the basic premise, you can just do it yourself. But to just show you what we did, for example, for that store, is we say that, again, you choose the SKU, you choose the dates, and then you say, you put in a very simple rule, which is if products left is less than 6, and again, this can be 600, depending on whatever the scale of that SKU is, increase the price by 20%. Now, this is extremely powerful because if we're running out of stock, right, we literally, it automatically increases the price by 20%. So we don't have to do anything. No one in our team needs to even think about this, right? It all happens automatically with the app. And people still purchase it, obviously the people who are willing to pay that surplus. And we sell those last items at a 20% higher margin, right? This is obviously a massive increase to our margin, or to anyone's margin, where that's how we increase AOV and our profitability. At the same time, the people who are willing to pay that surplus, right, are happy because they're still able to purchase that product. And at the same time, it obviously slows down the amount of orders we have, because not everyone's willing to pay that higher price, of course. But that gives us time to restock, right? Instead of just being out of stock, like many stores do, right? They just run out of stock, and then the button on Shopify just says, sorry, we're out of stock, please come back later. We at least buy ourselves more time to restock, and that is kind of also our trigger. That's already a red flag because it's a bit late, but the point is it buys ourselves time to restock and make sure that the people who still want to purchase it at the original price will be able to do so as fast as possible, because we'll be on top of our inventory management. And of course, once we're back in stock, you can add another rule that decreases the price back to the original price, whatever you want to, right? The point is you have those rules, and it can be pretty powerful. Now, this is related to items that have a lot of SKUs in a warehouse, like with this store. But you can actually also use this if you're drop shipping, or actually regardless of your logistical model, because again, I think with this idea, right, you just understand that obviously increasing or decreasing your price based on certain preset rules can be an effective way to essentially manage and optimize your AOV at different points in the week, month, day, whatever it might be, right? And that can be very powerful for some stores that have especially a lot of volume, where they can play around with this data. Before you bounce, get a free valuation of your Shopify store. Just fill in the 2-minute form below, and our team will get back to you within 24 hours with a detailed valuation for your store. Also, check out other free resources on our website, artikunooptimization.com, to automate and scale your Shopify store.